A Navy SEAL and his twins were thrown into a blizzard with nothing, until his dog uncovered a secret worth $200 million. Snow hammered the valley as Ethan Cross stood at the iron gate, his children shivering beside him and Thor growling at the men who'd cast them out. What none of them knew was that beneath the floor of a collapsing farmhouse, the truth their enemies feared was waiting to surface. The wind cut through Raven's Pass like a blade, cold enough to make the pines groan under the weight of ice. Ethan Cross stood at the iron gates of the Langston estate with snow collecting on his shoulders, his breath drifting into the frozen morning air. His twins, Lily and Noah, huddled close to him, their small hands wrapped around the handles of overstuffed duffel bags. Beside them, Thor stood rigid, ears pinned forward, tail stiff, his body a wall of muscle and loyalty between the children and the danger Ethan sensed was coming. Behind the gate, movers in thick jackets tossed the family's belongings out, as if they were clearing trash instead of memories. A lamp shattered on the driveway. A box of the twins' books spilled across the snow. One worker kicked aside a framed photo of Hannah, Ethan's late wife, the glass cracking in a jagged line across her smile. Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't bend to pick it up, not with his knees trembling the way they were, not with the humiliation burning behind his ribs. Gerald Langston stood on the far side of the gate wearing a black wool coat that seemed untouched by the storm. His gloved hands were clasped behind his back, and his silver hair was combed perfectly despite the wind. Two security guards flanked him, each one holding a hand on their holstered sidearms. Ethan knew the type. He had served with men who held their guns the same way. Calm, confident, ready to escalate if the moment called for it. "Ethan," Gerald said, voice sharp as the frost. "This arrangement was temporary. You and the children may collect your things, but your permission to stay here has ended." Ethan took one step forward. Thor followed, a low, thunderous growl rising from his chest. "Gerald, Hannah's funeral was 3 weeks ago," Ethan said quietly. "The kids haven't even finished grieving. We need time." Gerald's expression never softened. "You need stability, and clearly you cannot provide it. You have no income, no home, and no certainty. My daughter is gone, Ethan. You are not taking my grandchildren down with you." Lily buried her face into Ethan's coat, tears soaking through the fabric. Noah stared up at Gerald with a clenched jaw, trying to look braver than he felt. Ethan laid a hand on each of their shoulders, grounding himself through their weight, their warmth, their trembling grief. "This isn't stability," Ethan said. "This is cruelty." Gerald nodded toward the guards. "Escort them off the property." The gate buzzed, locks disengaging with a harsh clank. The wind seemed to roar louder as the metal swung open. The guards stepped out, forming a wall of black uniforms and stern eyes. Thor stood directly in front of Ethan, lowering his stance, shoulders rising as a warning. The guards hesitated, and Ethan rested a hand lightly on Thor's neck. "It's okay, boy," he whispered, though nothing about this moment was okay. One guard approached. "Sir, let's keep this calm. We don't want to upset the kids." Ethan nearly laughed, bitter, painful, but the knot in his chest made the sound die before it formed. "You're a little late for that," he said. The guard glanced down at Thor, reassessing whether approaching was a good idea. Thor didn't move, didn't blink, didn't break eye contact. Ethan gave a sharp whistle, and Thor reluctantly backed up a step, though his growl didn't ease. Gerald's voice echoed across the storm. "Take your things and go, Ethan. Raven's Pass is no longer your home." Home. The word twisted like wire in his throat. Hannah had grown up here. She had run through these halls as a child, danced in the courtyard lights as a teenager, and stood under the birch trees with Ethan the night she told him she was pregnant. This place held every good memory he had of her, and now It was pushing them out into the snow like they were nothing. The guards waited until Ethan gathered the scattered boxes and guided the children to the truck. Thor jumped into the back seat, positioning himself between the twins as if shielding them from the world outside. When Ethan shut the door, the muffled sobs from Lily pierced through his chest. He looked once more at Gerald. "You promised Hannah you'd protect her family." Gerald didn't blink. "I am protecting them." Ethan shook his head. "You're protecting your pride." With that, he climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. Snowflakes streaked across the windshield like sparks. As the truck pulled away, Gerald turned his back without watching them go, disappearing into the warm glow of the estate. Ethan drove down the long, winding road, the gates shrinking behind them until they vanished completely. Every breath he took burned, scraping against the grief lodged in his lungs. Every mile felt like a step farther from Hannah, from the life he'd thought they would build together. "Dad?" Noah's voice broke the silence. "Where are we going now?" Ethan stared ahead at the empty road, the storm swallowing the mountains on either side. He forced his voice to stay steady. "We're going somewhere safe, somewhere quiet." "Are we gonna be okay?" Lily whispered. Thor placed his head gently on her lap, and she stroked his ears with shaky fingers. Ethan didn't answer right away. The truth was heavy, brutal. But he wouldn't frighten them. Not now. Not when they had already lost so much. "We're going to be okay," he said finally, though he felt anything but. "We still have each other." And in the rearview mirror, Thor's amber eyes met his own, steady, unflinching, as if saying, "I'm here. I'll keep them safe. Keep you safe." Ethan exhaled slowly, letting that be enough for now. The storm deepened, the road narrowing as it led toward Cold Creek Valley, toward the only place left for them, toward the only place that might still take them in. Ethan kept both hands tight on the steering wheel, squinting through the blur of wind-driven snow. The headlights cut only a few yards ahead, the rest swallowed by darkness. Beside him, the twins leaned into Thor's warmth in the back seat, the dog's steady breathing the only sign of calm in the rattling cab. When the farmhouse finally emerged from the fog, it looked less like a home and more like a memory someone had tried to bury. The roof sagged in the middle, shingles torn away by years of storms. One shutter hung crooked. A porch step was missing entirely. The surrounding fields were blanketed in snow, untouched, except for a single set of old deer tracks that vanished near the barn. Ethan parked the truck and stepped into the biting wind. His boots sank deep into the snow, and he closed his eyes for a moment, steadying the ache pulsing behind his temples. "We'll make it work," he whispered to himself. "We always do." Thor leapt out first, landing with a soft thud. He lifted his head high, sniffing the air with sharp, deliberate breaths. The fur along his spine prickled. A warning sign Ethan had learned to trust long before he trusted himself. "Dad, is this it?" Noah asked softly as he stepped out, his breath rising in thin white clouds. "It's just for now," Ethan said. "We'll fix it up. It'll be warm, safe." But even as the words left his mouth, he wasn't sure he believed them. Inside, the farmhouse was darker than the storm outside. The air carried the scent of mold, cold earth, and old timber. The floorboards creaked under each step. A draft pushed through cracked window frames. The ceiling above the living room dipped as if carrying more weight than it could bear. Lily stood in the doorway, hugging her coat tighter. "Mom wouldn't like this place." Ethan knelt in front of her. "Your mom would like that we're together, that we're safe for the night. And tomorrow, we'll make it better, one step at a time." Lily nodded, though her eyes remained fixed on the broken corner of the room. Thor moved ahead, inspecting the house with practiced precision. His paws carried him room to room, sniffing, circling, then returning to a single warped floorboard near the fireplace. He pushed his nose against it, whining low. Ethan frowned. "Thor, leave it. Probably a raccoon nest." Thor didn't move. He pressed his paw against the board again, claws scraping the wood. "Dad," Noah whispered. "He doesn't do that unless it's something important." "I know," Ethan said softly. "But let's just settle in for now." He pulled their sleeping bags from a box and spread them in the warmest corner, near a small portable heater he'd brought from the truck. The heater hummed to life, casting a weak orange glow across the peeling wallpaper. The wind howled outside. The shutters banged. Snow slipped through the cracks and fell in soft piles on the floor. Still, Noah offered a brave smile. "It's not that bad, Dad. Feels like camping." Ethan forced a grin. Exactly like camping. But camping didn't make his chest tighten the way this place did. Camping didn't trigger the flickers of memory. Dust-filled rooms in faraway cities, broken buildings he'd been sent to clear, quiet corners where danger waited. He blinked hard, grounding himself with a slow breath, focusing on the heater's hum instead of the echoes clawing at him. Lily sat cross-legged, her sketchbook on her knees. She traced lines with numb fingers, drawing a face Ethan recognized instantly. Hannah, smiling the way she hadn't been able to smile near the end. "Mom used to draw all the time," Lily murmured. "Drawing helps me remember her." "It helps me too," Ethan said. "Keep drawing. Keep her close." Thor circled back to the warped floorboard. This time he barked once, sharp, insistent. Ethan stood, rubbing his temples. "Thor, seriously, not tonight." Thor's ears flattened as he looked back at Ethan. Not defiant, concerned. Noah knelt beside the dog. "He's trying to say something." "Dad, we should check." "We're cold. We're tired," Ethan said. "Tomorrow, okay?" "We'll look tomorrow." Thor backed away reluctantly, sitting between the twins as if accepting the compromise. For now. As the night deepened, the farmhouse settled with cracks and groans that sounded almost alive. A cold draft brushed across Ethan's neck, and he looked around sharply. He could hear the storm pounding the roof, each gust rattling the attic door. "Everyone get some rest," he said softly. "Long day tomorrow." Lily curled into her sleeping bag, her hand still resting on Thor's back. Noah pulled his beanie over his ears and turned onto his side. Thor remained sitting upright long after the children drifted to sleep, watching the door, watching the windows, watching the floorboard, as if guarding them against something only he could sense. Ethan lay down but didn't close his eyes. He couldn't. Every time he tried, he saw the iron gates slamming shut. He heard Gerald's cold voice. He remembered Hannah's hand slipping from his in that hospital bed. His throat tightened. The heater flickered once, sending shadows dancing across the cracked walls. Thor growled low, a quiet rumble, just enough to warn that the night wasn't as still as it seemed. Ethan breathed through another wave of trembling in his hands and forced himself to stay calm. "You're here," he whispered to Thor. "Keep them safe, just like always." Thor lay down at last, still alert, head on his paws, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the windows. Outside, the storm roared across Cold Creek Valley, swallowing the farmhouse in ice and wind. Inside, Ethan listened to the beating of the storm and the quiet breaths of his children, hoping that somehow, against all odds, tomorrow would hurt less than today. But deep in his gut, he knew the worst was still waiting in the shadows. Morning came slow and gray. A faint light seeped through the cracked windows, turning the frost on the glass into pale maps of white rivers and crooked mountains. Ethan pushed himself up from the cold floor, his back aching from another sleepless night. Thor was already awake, sitting straight-backed, staring at the door as if he'd held watch until dawn. Easy, boy, Ethan whispered. It's just morning. But Thor didn't relax. His ears twitched. His stare didn't break. Ethan rubbed the dog's head, then stood and nudged Noah gently with his boot. Come on, bud. Time to get ready for school. Noah groaned but sat up. Lily followed, rubbing sleep from her eyes. They looked exhausted, but determined. Kids who had already learned too much about losing and starting over. Once they were dressed, Ethan loaded them into the truck. The engine sputtered before rumbling awake. Thor hopped into the back seat, settling between the twins. Snow crunched under the tires as they descended the valley road toward the small schoolhouse in the center of town. Cold Creek Valley felt like a different world from Raven's Pass. Smaller, quieter, with a diner that opened before dawn and a gas station that doubled as the post office. A few people glanced up as Ethan drove by, the way small towns always noticed newcomers. Ethan dropped the kids off. Lily hugged him tight, her eyes lingering longer than normal. Noah gave a small nod, the kind of nod a boy gives when he wants to say, "I'll be fine," even if he's not. Then Ethan headed to his new job at the sawmill. The foreman, a gruff man named Dale Carson, handed him gloves and pointed to a stack of frozen lumber. Straight cuts, fast pace, no hero stuff. Got it, Ethan said. But throughout the morning he kept catching glimpses of something in the tree line beyond the mill. A dark shape. A glint. A stillness that didn't belong to the forest. On his break, he leaned against the rail and lifted his eyes to the ridge. The trees swayed in the wind, slow, rhythmic, but the shape between them didn't move. Then, just for a second, it did. A shift, a step, a dark coat slipping behind a pine trunk. A person. Ethan's heartbeat picked up. Not from fear, he hadn't felt fear in years, but from the familiar edge that sharpened his senses. Someone was watching. He scanned the ridge again. Nothing. Everything good, Cross? Dale asked, stepping outside for a smoke. Just stretching, Ethan said. Long night. Dale grunted. This valley'll eat a man alive if he lets it. Careful with that. Ethan nodded but said nothing. He kept, his eyes on the ridge long after Dale had gone back inside. When the shift ended, Ethan picked up the kids from school. Noah slid into the truck quickly. Lily climbed in slower, hugging her backpack close. How was it? Ethan asked. Okay, Lily said. Noah sighed. Some kids asked why Thor isn't with you anymore at the big house. I didn't know what to say. Ethan gripped the wheel tighter. Tell them we're starting fresh. That's all they need to know. The truck turned onto the long road leading back to the farmhouse. As they passed a bend near the edge of the timberline, Thor suddenly stood up, pressing his paws against the window, barking hard and fast. Alert, not scared. What is it? Lily whispered. Ethan slowed the truck and looked toward the woods. At first he saw nothing but trees. Then, there, barely visible between the pines. A black SUV parked just off the road, tucked behind brush. No headlights, no movement, no reason to be there. Ethan felt the back of his neck tighten. He drove on, forcing his breath steady. The kids didn't need more fear. But Thor wouldn't stop staring out the window until the SUV vanished behind the curve of the hill. Back at the farmhouse, Ethan let the kids inside and walked around the property, scanning the snow for tracks. Thor followed, nose low, ears rigid. Near the barn, Thor growled deep and low. Fresh footprints, human, led halfway around the structure before disappearing into the woods. Ethan crouched beside them. The tracks were crisp, less than a day old. Someone had been here. Dad? Noah called from the porch. Grandpa Gerald called the school office today. He said he's going to come see us soon. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Colder than the snow, colder than the storm had been. He turned to Noah. What did he say exactly? Noah swallowed. He said he'll make sure we end up where we belong. Ethan stared at the footprints in the snow, then at the tree line, then at the darkening sky. Thor leaned against him, sensing the tension gathering like thunder. This wasn't just pressure. This wasn't just intimidation. This was surveillance. This was preparation. Ethan stood slowly, his breath forming a cloud in the icy air. Kids, he said, get inside. Lock the doors. Noah paused. Why? Just do it, Ethan said, voice calm but firm. As they rushed inside, Thor remained by Ethan's leg, his body tense, ready. The dog's gaze stayed fixed on the woods, the same woods where the stranger had stood earlier, the same woods where footprints now led into silence. Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd lived through ambushes. He'd seen danger stalk victims long before it struck. The signs weren't subtle, not to him, not to Thor. Gerald Langston wasn't just angry, he was preparing for something bigger, and Ethan knew one truth more clearly than anything. The fight wasn't coming someday. It had already begun. By dusk, the wind had turned vicious, howling down from the Bitterroot Range like something alive, something hungry. Snow slapped against the farmhouse in heavy bursts, rattling the old window frames and pushing cold air through every crack in the walls. The storm warning on Ethan's phone buzzed twice before dying completely. The battery drained, the signal gone. Inside, the dim lantern on the kitchen table flickered as the power lines groaned under the weight of the storm. Lily and Noah huddled near the small wood stove, wrapped in blankets. Thor paced the floor in slow, tense steps, pausing often to stare at the front door like he expected it to burst open. "Dad?" Lily whispered. "Is someone coming?" Ethan stirred the fire, each spark lifting toward the chimney like a tiny prayer. "It's just the storm," he said. "Stay close to the heat." But Thor didn't fear storms. That wasn't what had him unsettled. It was something else. Something Ethan could feel too, in the hollow of his chest, in the tightening of his lungs, the way they tightened before breaching a door in hostile territory. Outside, something banged against the side of the house. Once, twice, a long scrape followed. Ethan stood instantly. Thor froze mid-pace, ears straight up, lip lifting in a low, warning growl. Noah gripped Lily's hand. "Dad?" "Stay back," Ethan said softly. He moved toward the window, slowly lifting the corner of the curtain. The wind blew sideways sheets of snow so thick he could barely see the porch. Nothing moved out there. No figure, no vehicle. But the scrape had sounded intentional, heavy, human. "Probably a loose shutter," he murmured. But even he didn't believe it. A sudden violent knock rattled the entire front door. Thor lunged forward, barking with full force, body planted like a barricade. Ethan braced himself, but the knock didn't return. No voice followed. No silhouette crossed the window. Just the storm again. For several minutes, the house remained still. Then another sound cut through the wind, a deep, hollow creak from the living room floorboards, the exact spot Thor had been obsessed with since they arrived. The dog spun around, charging toward it. He pawed at the old boards, whining low, frantic. Ethan followed, shining a lantern over the warped planks. One board bowed inward under Thor's weight, sinking slightly. Too much. "Thor, back!" Ethan ordered, pulling the dog aside. Another groan, another shift. And then, in one sudden, violent collapse, the floor caved in. Snow-damp wood shattered downward, sending splinters into the air. Lily screamed. Noah scrambled away. Thor barked fiercely, lunging toward the hole, but stopping just at the edge, muscles rigid with instinct. Ethan dropped beside the opening, lantern in hand. A cold draft rose from the darkness below. Dust swirled in the beam of light, slowly, revealing a rectangular metal surface, A box. Not a chest. Not a crate. A military-grade lockbox. Black steel. Reinforced corners. Fasteners identical to the ones Ethan had used overseas to secure classified gear. His breath caught. His fingers tightened around the lantern handle. "No way," he muttered. "Hannah, what did you do?" He reached down, grabbing the edge of the lockbox. It was heavy, but he managed to lift it onto the broken floor. Snow and ice melted slowly along its top surface, trailing down its sides like tears. The fasteners released with a soft metallic click, too easy, as if they'd been opened recently, or as if they were meant to be opened now. Inside, wrapped in a faded shawl Hannah used to wear on winter mornings, lay a sealed envelope addressed in Hannah's handwriting. A USB drive in a protective case, legal papers with signatures he didn't recognize. A business card for Samuel Pierce, attorney at law. And at the top of the stack, a letter with Ethan's name written slowly, carefully. Lily and Noah knelt beside him. Thor lay close, head pressed against Ethan's knee. "Dad, what is it?" Lily whispered. Ethan's throat tightened. He brushed snow off the letter, his hands shaking, not from the cold, but from the recognition of Hannah's looping handwriting. "It's your mom," he whispered. "She left this for me." He opened the letter. "Ethan, if you are reading this, then what I feared has already begun." His heart stopped. The wind outside went silent. Even the storm seemed to listen. "My father will not stop until he controls everything. Our children, our home, our future. I have protected what I could, but you need help. The truth is in Samuel Pierce's hands. Do not trust my father. Do not wait. Protect Lily and Noah. And trust Thor. He knows." Ethan swallowed hard, staring at the page until the words blurred. The storm roared again, louder than any before, as if the mountains themselves were reacting to the letter. Noah gasped. "Mom knew? She knew all of this?" Ethan pressed the letter to his chest, closing his eyes briefly. He felt the weight of Hannah's warning settle deep into him, a weight heavier than grief, heavier even than fear. "She knew," Ethan said quietly, "and she tried to guide us." Thor leaned into Ethan harder, a low rumble in his throat. Not threat, but urgency. It was as if the dog understood this moment mattered more than any before. Ethan looked around at the broken floorboards, at the storm outside, at the shadows shifting across the windows. Someone had knocked. Someone had scraped the siding. Someone had stood in the timberline earlier today. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't paranoia. This was a countdown. He lifted the box, holding it close. "Kids," he said, voice low but steady. "We're not staying here tonight." Lily's eyes widened. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safer," he said. "Somewhere they won't expect." Thor barked once, sharp, decisive, then moved toward the door as if leading the way. Ethan looked down at the box again, at Hannah's words, at the truth she'd buried beneath their feet. He had suspected danger. Now he knew it. Gerald Langston wasn't just trying to take the children. He was trying to erase Ethan entirely. And Hannah, she had left him the first weapon in this war, a truth sealed in steel, hidden under their home, guarded by a dog who had never stopped watching over them. The storm raged harder, but Ethan no longer feared it. The real storm had only just begun. By morning, the blizzard had quieted into a dense, eerie stillness. The sky hung low over Cold Creek Valley, heavy with unfallen snow, casting a gray curtain across the land. The farmhouse creaked as if waking from a restless night, its broken floorboards now a gaping wound in the center of the living room. The metal lockbox, Hannah's secret, rested beside Ethan's boots like a silent witness. He didn't waste time. He packed the children's bags, grabbed essentials, and loaded everything into the truck. Thor jumped in, sitting upright, as though guarding the lockbox at Ethan's feet. "Dad," Lily whispered, "are we running away?" He paused, hand on the truck door. "No," he said softly. "We're going to get answers." The drive down the frozen mountain road felt longer than usual. The tires slid over hidden patches of ice, and the thick forest lining the route seemed to lean inward, watching them. Twice Thor growled at the tree line. Twice Ethan resisted the urge to stop and check. He didn't have the luxury of fear anymore. He had children to protect. At the edge of town sat an old brick building with a faded sign, Pierce and Watson Law Office. Ethan pulled into the parking lot and killed the engine. Thor jumped out first, scanning the perimeter before allowing the twins to exit. Inside, the office smelled of paper and cedar. A receptionist led them to a private room where attorney Samuel Pierce waited. A man in his late 60s with calm eyes and a face lined by both wisdom and worry. "Mr. Cross," he said, standing to shake Ethan's hand. "I was hoping you'd come sooner." Ethan hesitated. "My wife, Hannah, she left your card in a box under our floor." Samuel nodded slowly. "I know. I advised her to hide it somewhere only you and Thor might find." Thor looked up at the man, ears twitching, but he didn't growl. A good sign. Samuel motioned for Ethan to open the lockbox. Ethan placed it on the desk and lifted the lid. The lawyer's expression tightened with recognition. "Yes," Samuel murmured. She followed every instruction. Lily and Noah sat beside Ethan, hands clasped, breath held. "What is this?" Ethan asked. "What did Hannah hide from me?" Samuel exhaled deeply, then pulled a folder from his briefcase. "Your wife was the sole heir to her grandmother's private estate. Not the Langston fortune. Her maternal line had its own wealth that Gerald Langston never controlled, and Hannah inherited all of it." Ethan blinked. "How much are we talking about? A savings account?" Samuel met his eyes. "No, Ethan. $200 million. The room fell silent. Snow tapped against the windows. The heater hummed softly. No one breathed. Lily's eyes widened. Noah froze. Thor let out a quiet huff, sensing the sudden shift in the room's energy. Ethan shook his chin head. "That's impossible. Hannah never lived like someone with money. We struggled. I took night shifts. We bought second-hand clothes." "She did that deliberately," Samuel said gently. "She didn't want the Langston family or anyone to use wealth to control your marriage. Her grandmother insisted the fortune be kept secret until Hannah deemed it necessary." Ethan lowered his voice. "And when Hannah died, the trust activated?" Samuel nodded. "But only under specific conditions. Conditions Hannah designed to protect you." He slid a document across the table. Activation clause. Trust is to be revealed only if Hannah's death results in coercion, manipulation, or attempted custody interference toward her husband or children. Ethan stared at the clause until the words blurred. Gerald Langston had thrown him out, filed false reports, sent people into the valley, wanted custody of the twins. The trust had predicted everything. "She knew," Ethan whispered, voice breaking. "She knew he would try to take the kids." Samuel folded his hands. Hannah spent her final months preparing for this. Every document, every instruction, every legal safeguard. She put all of it in place to protect you and the twins. Lily leaned against Thor, her voice small. "Did she know Grandpa would be mean?" Samuel softened. She knew he valued control more than love. She worried that after she was gone, Gerald would try to decide your lives for you. Ethan clenched his fists. "So that's what this is? A war over control? A war you didn't choose, Samuel said, but one Hannah prepared you for. Ethan sat in silence, trying to process the truth. Snow drifted in slow spirals outside the window, peaceful, almost mocking. Inside him, something heavy shifted. Anger, disbelief, sorrow, and something else rising beneath it. Purpose. What happens now? Ethan asked. Samuel opened another folder. The trust gives you full legal authority over the estate and its assets. But more importantly, it provides protections. Custody protections. Financial protections. Witness protections, if necessary. Witness protections, Ethan repeated. Samuel's expression darkened. Gerald has already tried to file emergency custody claims. He's hired investigators. He's working to paint you as unstable and financially unfit. Lily and Noah drew closer to Ethan, their voices small. He can't take us, right? Lily whispered. Ethan looked at his children, then at Thor, steady, strong, loyal. No, Ethan said firmly. He can't. Samuel's tone shifted. But Ethan, you must understand something. Gerald will not stop. Not until he gets what he wants. Ethan nodded slowly. He won't, he agreed. But neither will I. Thor stood, coming to Ethan's side, his body blocking the twins protectively. His eyes locked onto Samuel as if to say, Ethan isn't alone. Samuel placed one last document on the desk, a letter sealed in wax. She left this for you, he said, her final words about the trust. Ethan stared at the envelope, throat tightening. Read it when you're ready, Samuel said. Not before. Outside, the low rumble of an engine approached. Thor's ears snapped forward. He growled softly. Samuel stepped to the window. That's not one of ours. A black SUV rolled slowly down the snowy street. The same one from the timberline. The same one Thor had sensed. Ethan felt the old instinct rise. The battlefield instinct. The one Hannah had always calmed. The one Thor had always sharpened. He closed the lockbox and stood. It's starting, he said. Samuel's jaw tightened. Ethan, be careful. Thor pressed against Ethan's leg, ready for whatever came next. Ethan lifted the box. No, he said quietly. It's time to finish what Hannah started. The snow crunched beneath Ethan's boots as he stepped out of the law office, the lockbox tucked tightly under one arm. Thor moved ahead of him in a protective arc, body tense, tail stiff, scanning every doorway and every shadow. Lily and Noah clung to each other behind him, their small footprints trailing his in the fresh snow. Across the street, the black SUV idled, engine rumbling low, windows tinted too dark for the winter morning. Ethan felt the same prickling behind his neck he'd felt on deployment, that instinctual warning that eyes were fixed on him. Kids, Ethan said softly, get in the truck, now. They obeyed without question. Thor remained at Ethan's side, growling deep, steady, a warning without uncertainty. The SUV crept forward, inching past the curb like a predator too confident to rush. Ethan watched it slow slide down the road until it turned the corner and disappeared behind the old grain mill. Only then did he open the truck door. Dad, Noah said, voice shaking. Was that Grandpa's people? Ethan didn't answer. Not yet. He wasn't ready to put that fear into words for them. Instead, he started the engine, turned up the heat, and drove. The long road from town back into Cold Creek Valley stretched empty, the sky flattening into a sheet of white. Thor stood in the back seat the whole way, never taking his eyes from the side mirrors. Something was wrong. Something was coming. It was late afternoon when the first blow landed. The farmhouse lights flickered twice, then died completely, plunging the entire property into a cold, unnatural silence. Lily gasped. Noah froze. Thor bolted upright, a sharp, warning bark cutting the air. Ethan grabbed the flashlight and checked the breakers. Every switch was still up. A breaker didn't do this, he muttered. He stepped outside, scanning the perimeter. The cold bit instantly into his skin. The snow near the back of the house was disturbed. 2 sets of footprints, deep and fresh, leading straight toward the back power conduit, and cut wires dangling like snapped vines. Someone was here, Ethan whispered. Thor growled at the woods, body rigid. Then a rustle, a branch breaking. A figure, briefly visible between the trees, turned and vanished into the forest. Thor lunged forward, barking so hard his whole body shook. "No!" Ethan snapped. "Stay!" Thor stopped mid-stride, panting, eyes fixed on the darkness. Ethan scanned the woods, heart hammering. Whoever cut the power hadn't expected Thor, or hadn't cared. Either way, this wasn't random vandalism. Someone wanted them vulnerable. Cold, afraid, unprotected. The wolves were closing in. Night fell fully, swallowing the farmhouse in thick blue darkness. The only light came from a lantern on the kitchen table and the faint glow of embers in the wood stove. Ethan forced calm into his voice. "Kids, stay close to Thor." Lily scooted nearer, resting her small hand on Thor's back. Noah sat beside them, trying to look braver than he felt. Thor didn't relax for a second. Then came the sound Ethan dreaded most. Footsteps. Slow, measured, heavy. On the porch. Ethan reached for the shotgun he kept unloaded above the doorframe, a habit from the SEAL days. He didn't load it. He didn't point it. But holding it grounded him, steadying his breathing. A knock followed. 3 firm raps, not frantic, not desperate. Controlled. "Mr. Cross?" a voice called, muffled through the door. Ethan stiffened. He knew that voice. Sheriff Don Halford. He cracked the door open just enough to stare out. Halford stood alone on the porch, snow on his shoulders, badge glinting in the lantern light. But his eyes shifted away too quickly, like a man who didn't want to be here. "Evening, Ethan," Halford said. "Heard you lost power." "How would you know that?" Ethan asked. Halford didn't blink. "Town saw the line go down. Thought I'd check in." Ethan watched him carefully. Thor pressed up against Ethan's leg, a low growl vibrating in his chest. "Sheriff," Ethan said, "if you're here to help, say it plainly. If you're here for something else, say that too." Halford swallowed. "Look, Ethan, I'm not here to make trouble, but I need to give you a warning. From me to you." Ethan tensed. "What kind of warning?" Halford dropped his gaze, voice growing tight. "You need to leave Cold Creek Valley. Tonight. Before this situation gets worse for you and the kids." The air froze. "What situation?" Ethan asked slowly. Halford hesitated. "Gerald Langston filed emergency custody claims. Said you're unstable. Said the kids aren't safe out here. And with your background, the PTSD..." Ethan's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "My background is the reason my kids are alive." Halford shifted, uncomfortable. "Doesn't matter what's true. What matters is what's being filed. The Langstons have pull. If they push this hard enough, my kids aren't going anywhere," Ethan snapped. Halford exhaled. "I know you're a good father, but paperwork, judges, money, none of it cares about that." "Are you saying you're taking them?" Ethan demanded. Halford raised his hands. "No, sir. Not tonight. Not without a court order. I'm just telling you what's coming. Thor barked sharply. The sheriff flinched. This isn't right, Ethan said. You know that. Halford nodded once. Doesn't change the fact it's happening. The sheriff turned to leave, then paused. His voice dropped to a whisper. And Ethan, the men who cut that line, they weren't kids. They weren't locals. Don't let them catch you off guard again. Ethan shut the door with a slow, controlled force, locking it twice. The room stayed silent for a long time. Then Lily whispered, Dad, are they going to take us? No, Ethan said firmly, not while I'm breathing. But inside, a storm even stronger than the blizzard raged through him. PTSD tremors rippled down his spine. His vision tunneled. His breathing grew shallow. Flashback light cracked across his memory. Sand, heat, metal doors, gunfire. He gripped the table hard. Thor moved instantly, pressing his body against Ethan's legs, leaning his full weight to ground him. The dog's warmth cut through the rising panic, anchoring Ethan back to the present, back to his kids, back to the cold farmhouse. Ethan placed a shaky hand on Thor's head. I'm okay, he whispered. I'm here. The tremors eased. The memory faded. Thor stayed pressed against him until Ethan could breathe again. Then Ethan stood, strength returning to his voice. They want to fight? He said quietly. They're going to get one. Noah tugged on his sleeve. What do we do now? Ethan looked through the broken floorboards at the empty, gaping hole where Hannah's secret had been buried. We keep moving, Ethan said. We stay sharp. And we stay together, Lily added, clutching Thor. Ethan nodded. Always. Thunder cracked outside, far off but coming closer. The wolves were no longer just watching. They were closing in, and Ethan Cross was done running. But resolve alone couldn't hold back the night. Cold Creek Valley descended into an unnatural quiet after the sheriff left. The storm had weakened into a steady fall of snow, each flake drifting through the darkness like ash. The wind no longer howled, but the silence it left behind felt heavier, like the valley itself was holding its breath. Inside the dim farmhouse, the lantern light trembled weakly, throwing long shadows across the walls. Lily and Noah sat close to Thor, whispering to him, petting him, needing the comfort of his steady warmth. Ethan paced near the broken floorboards, replaying every word Samuel Pierce had said. $200 million. Custody threats, surveillance, danger at the door. And Hannah knew it all before she died. Ethan stopped pacing, pressing both hands against the table until the knuckles whitened. He'd lived through ambushes, gunfire, and nights where the desert wind carried the sound of the wounded. But this was different. He couldn't simply fight his way through a threat that hid behind lawyers and lies. He couldn't outshoot the kind of wealth and power that Gerald Langston wielded like a weapon. But he could outlast it. Thor suddenly stood, ears snapping upright. He walked to the back door, nose low, sniffing intently. What is it? Ethan asked. Thor whined softly, pawing at the frame. Ethan grabbed the flashlight and cracked open the door. The cold knifed into the room. Snowflakes swirled violently in the beam of light. Outside, the farm was silent. No footprints, no movement, no intruders. Ethan stepped onto the porch, Thor pushing forward beside him. The dog sniffed the air, then turned his head toward the barn, the old leaning structure at the edge of the property. Thor's tail went stiff. He barked once, deep and certain. Ethan tightened his grip on the flashlight. You smell something there? Thor barked again. Ethan didn't like it. Nothing good ever waited in a dark barn on a night like this. But Thor moved ahead with purpose, and Ethan trusted that instinct more than anything else in his life. Kids, stay inside, Ethan said, raising his voice just enough. Lock the door. Lily's frightened voice floated back. "Dad, be careful." "I will," he said. "Thor's with me." That was all they needed to hear. Ethan followed Thor through the thick snow. Every crunch of his boots echoed in the hollow air. The barn door rattled in the wind, half broken from years of neglect. Thor reached it first, scratching at the wood, growling, not at danger, but at something buried, hidden. Ethan pulled the door open with a groan of rusted hinges. Inside, the smell of hay and earth filled the tight space. Dust floated in the air, and old tools hung crooked on the walls. Thor sniffed the ground, circling the far left corner of the barn, the place where loose hay lay in an unnatural mound. "What is it, boy?" Ethan whispered. Thor dug hard, sending hay scattering. Metal clinked beneath his paws. Ethan knelt beside him and brushed the hay away. A second lockbox, smaller, older, and half buried in dirt. His breath hitched. "Hannah," he whispered. "What else did you hide?" He lifted the box with both hands. Its weight felt familiar, like the boxes they'd used overseas to secure personal effects. The metal was cold as ice. A simple latch held it shut. He opened it slowly. Inside lay 2 items, a flash drive wrapped in cloth and a sealed envelope marked only with his name. His heartbeat echoed in his ears. The silence of the barn felt sacred now, heavy with truth. He picked up the letter, recognizing Hannah's handwriting instantly. A lump rose in his throat. He sank to the barn floor, leaning against a beam as he broke the seal. Her voice seemed to whisper from the page as he read, "Ethan, if you're reading this, then my father has already begun his plan. I knew he would. I've known for a long time. You must protect Lily and Noah, even from the people who share their blood." Ethan swallowed hard. Thor lay beside him, resting his head on Ethan's leg. "The money is real. The threats are real. And everything I left behind was meant to guide you. The drive contains recordings, documents, and proof of everything my father has done. Use them only when you have to. Trust Pierce, and trust Thor. He will lead you when I'm gone." Ethan stopped reading, eyes burning. "I'm sorry, my love. I didn't want to leave you with this, but I knew you were the only one strong enough to survive it. I believe in you. You always protected us. Now protect yourself, too." The words blurred as a tear slipped down his cheek. For the first time since Hannah died, Ethan allowed himself to crumble, quietly, deeply. He pressed the letter to his chest. Thor lifted his head and gave a soft, rumbling sound, placing a paw gently on Ethan's leg. Ethan wasn't alone in the dark. Not anymore. Not ever. Footsteps approached behind him, light, hesitant. He turned to see Lily and Noah standing in the barn doorway, worry etched into their faces. "Dad," Lily whispered. He didn't hide the tears. He didn't hide the pain. He simply held out an arm. They rushed into his embrace. All 3 of them clung to each other, a small family bound tightly against the cold world pressing in from every side. Thor curled around them protectively, closing the circle. Ethan finally found his voice. "Your mom left this for us," he whispered. "She knew what was coming. She knew her father, and she trusted us to get through it." Lily nodded, face buried against his shoulder. Noah wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Thor nudged closer, as if promising silently that he would guide them where they needed to go. Ethan looked down at Hannah's final message one more time. "Trust Thor. Trust yourself. The truth is beneath everything you fear." He closed the letter carefully, his heart steadier than before, because now he understood. Hannah hadn't just left warnings. She had left a path, a way forward, a map through the darkness, and Thor, faithful, watchful Thor, had found it. Ethan stood slowly, pulling Lily and Noah to their feet. "We go back inside," he said softly. "We rest tonight. And tomorrow, Noah asked. Ethan looked toward the forest, where the wolves waited, where Gerald Langston's shadow loomed. "Tomorrow," Ethan said, "we fight back." Thor barked once, sharp, certain, as if to say, "And we won't lose." Morning came with a strange, fragile calm. Snow blanketed the valley so thickly that the world outside looked washed clean, pure, untouched by the danger that had crept so close the night before. The farmhouse, though battered and old, held a rare warmth inside. Hannah's letter tucked safely in a drawer, the flash drive locked in the box, Thor sleeping lightly at the twins' feet. For the first time in days, Ethan made breakfast without rushing, without watching the windows every few minutes. He didn't trust the peace, but he needed the kids to feel it, even briefly. Lily giggled as Thor nudged her hand for a piece of toast. Noah tried to teach him a trick. For a small moment, they were just a family, scarred, tired, struggling, but still together. Then the crunch of tires on fresh snow shattered the morning. Thor leapt up instantly, barking with a force that shook the walls. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "Kids, go to the back room," he said, already moving to the window. A convoy of sheriff's vehicles crawled up the driveway. 2 cruisers and a black unmarked Tahoe. The kind of combination that meant paperwork, orders, signatures, and trouble. "Dad?" Noah whispered, peeking from behind the doorway. Ethan didn't sugarcoat it. "Stay with Thor. Do not come out unless I call you." He stepped onto the porch as the vehicles stopped. The sheriff's deputies climbed out, boots sinking into the snow, eyes avoiding his. Sheriff Don Halford emerged last, holding a folder that already told Ethan everything he needed to know. "Morning, Ethan," Halford said quietly. "This isn't a welfare check," Ethan replied. Halford shook his head. "I'm sorry." One deputy stepped forward with a stack of papers. "By order of the court, we're here to take temporary custody of Lily and Noah Cross, effective immediately." "No," Ethan said, voice low and steady. "You're not taking my kids." Halford's eyes flicked with regret. "Ethan, don't make this harder." Ethan stepped between the deputies and the door. "You don't have cause. You don't have proof of harm. You have nothing but Gerald Langston's money behind a stamp." The deputy tightened his jaw. "Sir, step aside." Thor burst through the cracked door before Ethan could stop him, planting himself directly in front of Ethan, body lowered, teeth bared, the sharpest growl Ethan had ever heard vibrating through the snow. "Easy!" Ethan barked. "Thor, stay!" But the dog didn't move. He wasn't out of control. He was controlled, protecting the family exactly as he had been trained to. Halford raised his hands. "Nobody touch that dog. Nobody." The deputies froze. Nobody wanted to provoke a trained military K9. The standoff sat frozen in the frost-laced air, tension coiling tighter with every breath. Then a voice cut through the moment like a blade. "That court order is invalid." All heads turned. A single sedan pulled into the driveway, snow spraying from its tires. Attorney Samuel Pierce climbed out, his coat flapping in the wind, a folder of his own in hand. "Sheriff," Samuel said, striding forward, "if you enforce that order, you'll be violating a federal injunction." Halford blinked. "A what?" Samuel held out a document sealed with a federal stamp. "Filed this morning, approved at 8:14 a.m. Ethan Cross is under federal protection via the estate trust. That includes parental rights. Any local custody action is automatically suspended." The deputy stammered. "But, sir, the judge already signed." "And the injunction overrides it," Samuel said sharply. "Which means if you proceed, I will personally file charges of unlawful removal." Halford blew out a long breath. "Pierce, you just dropped a bomb on this valley." "Not I," Samuel corrected, "but Gerald Langston." As if summoned by his own reputation, a black luxury SUV rolled into the drive behind the cruisers. The door opened, and Gerald Langston stepped out, scarf, tailored coat, polished boots sinking into the snow without slowing him. He walked straight toward Ethan, face carved from stone, voice dripping cold oil. "This is unnecessary, Ethan. You could have simply handed them over." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're my children. I'm their father." Gerald's lips curled. "And you are unfit, financially unstable, mentally compromised, living in a shack with a dangerous animal." Thor growled deeper. Gerald stepped closer, glaring at the dog. "Look at that creature. No child should be around." Ethan cut him off. "Thor saved their lives. More times than you ever cared to." Gerald snapped back. "Your wife wanted better for those children." Ethan's eyes burned. "Hannah chose me. She trusted me. She protected us from you." For the first time, Gerald faltered. Just slightly. Ethan stepped forward, voice rising, raw and powerful. "She hid everything because she knew what you are." Samuel nodded. "And now her protections have activated. Ethan has legal custody, full custody. Gerald, your attempts to interfere end today." Gerald's face flushed red, anger mixed with humiliation. "We'll see about that." "Do that," Samuel replied calmly. "I'd love to let a federal judge see your tactics." Halford finally lowered the custody papers. "We're done here," he said, signaling to the deputies. "Let's go." The deputies returned to their cruisers, grateful to leave before things escalated further. But Gerald lingered, eyes fixed on Ethan. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You will not raise my grandchildren in this—" He gestured to the farmhouse with bitter disgust. "This ruin." Ethan didn't look away. "I'll raise them in love. Something you never gave Hannah." Gerald's eyes flashed, lethal cold. "You are a mistake she should never have made." Ethan stepped closer, Thor pressing into his side. "You don't get to rewrite her life," Ethan said quietly. "And you don't get to rewrite ours." Thor barked once, a thunderous sound that echoed across the snow. Gerald flinched. Samuel placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Let him leave. He's lost for today." Gerald finally retreated to his SUV, slamming the door. The vehicles rolled away, leaving tire marks carved into the snow like wounds. Silence settled over the valley. Ethan exhaled, shaking from the adrenaline. The twins burst from the doorway and wrapped their arms around him. He dropped to his knees and held them close, Thor circling them protectively, pressing his head into their shoulders. "It's okay," Ethan whispered. "You're safe. We're safe." But as he held them, he knew something with chilling clarity. Gerald Langston had money, power, influence, and men willing to do his bidding in the shadows. Ethan had barely survived this ambush. The next one would be worse. The storm in the valley had changed shape. It was no longer snow, it was war. And it was coming for them. The valley lay draped in quiet after Gerald's convoy retreated, but the silence that remained wasn't comforting. It was the kind of quiet that came after a warning shot, the kind that told Ethan the next one wouldn't be a warning at all. Inside the farmhouse, Ethan ushered the twins in and locked the door. Thor paced from window to window, nose pressed to the glass, tail stiff and pointed, a sentinel waiting for the next move. Samuel Pierce stood near the table, adjusting his glasses as he pulled out the documents Gerald had tried to weaponize. "Ethan," he said, "we have what we need, but we have to move quickly." Ethan rubbed a hand over his face. "Tell me what we're dealing with." Samuel opened a folder as thick as a field manual. "Your father-in-law filed multiple claims, emergency custody, mental instability accusations, financial endangerment, all fabricated." "Of course he did," Ethan muttered. "He's been preparing this for months," Samuel continued. He suppressed every legal notice concerning the trust. He tried to sabotage your background checks. He even hired private investigators to document your life here in the valley. Ethan stiffened. The SUV in the trees. The cut power line. Samuel nodded. Yes, and we have proof, timestamps, photographs, anomaly reports, everything. Lily stood beside Thor, stroking his ears. Mom knew, she whispered. She knew he was dangerous. Ethan knelt beside her. She knew he wanted control, and she did everything she could to protect us. Noah looked up from the old letter with wide, worried eyes. What happens now? Ethan met Samuel's gaze. This is where we fight back. Samuel nodded and placed a final stack of papers on the table. We take this to court. Not here. The local judge is too connected to Gerald. We're filing at the state level. Once this hits their desk, everything changes. Ethan clenched his jaw. Let's do it. 2 days later, the courtroom in Helena sat heavy with anticipation. Snow drifted outside the tall windows, and the wooden benches creaked as strangers shifted in their seats. Reporters whispered, sensing a story. Members of the Valley community appeared as well, drawn by rumors of a wealthy man trying to seize the children of a seal widower. Ethan sat tall at the table beside Samuel, his suit worn but clean, his hands steady. Thor rested at his feet, calm but alert, one paw touching Ethan's boot for grounding. Across the aisle sat Gerald Langston, stiff-backed, expression carved from ice, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. Gerald didn't acknowledge Ethan. He didn't even look at the children, seated quietly behind Samuel. Judge Whitmore entered, and everyone rose. The sound of the gavel striking wood carried through the room like a gunshot. Court is now in session. Samuel rose, his voice steady, resonant. Your Honor, today we present evidence of unlawful coercion, suppression of legal documents, attempted custodial interference, and psychological manipulation carried out by Gerald Langston against the family of his deceased daughter. Gerald's lawyer objected immediately, sputtering, Your Honor, these claims are… But Samuel didn't pause. He clicked the remote, and the first image projected onto the courtroom screen. A photo of the cut power line at the farmhouse. This was no accident. Next slide. The SUV hidden in the timberline. This was surveillance. Next slide. Suppressed trust notifications, marked with Gerald's signature. This was interference. Gerald's face darkened, a muscle twitching near his temple. Then Samuel displayed the signed statements from law enforcement, confirming private investigators hired by Gerald had attempted to fabricate reports about the children's safety. And then, to the collective gasp of the room, the footage from Hannah's flash drive appeared. A recording of her voice, weak, trembling, but clear. If something happens to me, my father will try to take Ethan's place. Don't trust him. Ethan closed his eyes, swallowing hard against the knot forming in his throat. Hearing her voice again, her fear, her clarity, felt like reopening a wound he'd tried to stitch shut 100 times. But beside him, Thor leaned harder against his leg, anchoring him to the moment. When the recording ended, the courtroom remained silent. Then Ethan stood. He didn't plan to speak, but the words rose anyway. I served my country for 15 years, he said, voice steady. I've held brothers in my arms as they took their last breaths. I've protected people I didn't know with everything I had, and I will not let anyone take my children from me. Lily sniffled quietly. Noah squeezed her hand. Thor sat tall, almost regal, his gaze locked on Ethan with unwavering loyalty. Samuel stepped forward. Your Honor, every piece of evidence points to one truth. Gerald Langston cared more about power than about his daughter's wishes or his grandchildren's safety. Ethan Cross is a capable father, a devoted father, a man who has endured enough loss for a lifetime. Judge Whitmore lifted her glasses, eyes scanning the mountain of documents. I have seen enough. Gerald's lawyer paled. Your Honor, please, but the judge raised a hand. The court hereby dismisses all custody petitions filed by Gerald Langston. Furthermore, due to the presented evidence, an investigation into Mr. Langston's actions will begin immediately. Mr. Cross retains full legal custody of his children, with all rights protected under the trust set forth by his late wife. A cry of relief broke from Lily. Noah exhaled hard, almost collapsing into his sister. Ethan's breath left him in a rush, as if someone had lifted a 2-ton weight from his chest. Samuel squeezed his shoulder. Thor barked once, sharp and triumphant. Gerald rose, furious. This isn't over, Ethan. Ethan met his cold stare with something far stronger. Yes, he said. It is. The drive back to Cold Creek Valley felt different. Lighter, warmer, despite the winter wind. The farmhouse sat waiting for them like a survivor of the storm, worn but standing. Ethan spent the next days repairing the place. Using the trust's emergency funds, he replaced windows, patched the roof, fixed the front steps. Lily helped paint the living room. Noah helped install insulation. The house slowly transformed from a crumbling shelter into a real home. Thor watched every hammer swing, every brushstroke, every laugh shared between father and children. Healing seeped into the walls, into the floorboards where secrets once hid. Thor's injury from the fight with the intruder was treated by the local vet, stitches and rest. The twins cared for him all day, brushing his fur, feeding him by hand, whispering to him as if he were part brother, part guardian angel. And to them he was both. One evening, as snow drifted softly outside, Ethan stepped onto the porch. The valley lay quiet. No more SUVs in the timberline. No more footsteps in the woods. Thank you, Hannah, he murmured, for trusting me, for trusting us. Behind him, Thor pressed his warm head against Ethan's hand, as if answering. You weren't alone. Not then. Not now. Not ever. For the first time since Hannah's death, Ethan allowed himself to breathe without fear. But far above the valley, beyond Frostline Ridge, thunder rolled again. Not from a storm, from the past, from the mountain, from the truth Hannah had begun to reveal. And Ethan knew the next battle wouldn't be legal. It would be personal. It would be painful. But he wasn't afraid. Not with his children beside him. Not with Thor guiding him. Not with Hannah's voice still echoing in his heart. The seal was done surviving. Now he was ready to rebuild. But rebuilding had a way of stirring what had been buried, both in the earth and in the heart. Winter sunlight stretched thin across Cold Creek Valley, soft but cold, like a hand brushing over old wounds. The farmhouse repairs were nearly done, and warmth returned to the rooms that once groaned with emptiness. Lily's laughter began to carry through the hallways again. Noah spent afternoons helping Thor regain strength, tossing sticks into the snow, while the dog limped with determined pride to fetch them. It should have felt like peace, but peace was never simple for Ethan Cross. One morning before dawn, he woke with a weight in his chest he couldn't shake. Not fear, not panic, something deeper, like unfinished business pressing against his ribs. Hannah's voice from the recorded message had echoed through his dreams all night. Trust yourself. The truth is beneath everything you fear. He got dressed quietly, careful not to wake the twins. Thor lifted his head the moment Ethan reached for his jacket. You're coming, Ethan whispered. Thor rose slowly, still stiff from recovery, but willing, always willing, when Ethan called. The air outside was sharp with frost. The sky above Frostline Ridge glowed faint blue, the world holding its breath in the minutes before sunrise. Ethan glanced back at the farmhouse, light glowing through the kitchen window, a sign of fragile hope. Then he began the climb. The path up the ridge was steep, packed with snow that crunched under every step. Ethan walked it like a man visiting a battlefield, steady, purposeful, but carrying the ghosts of everything he'd lost. Thor stayed close, sometimes brushing against Ethan's leg, grounding him through the tremors that occasionally shook his hands. Halfway up, Ethan paused, chest tightening, breath short. A wave of memory hit him. Sand instead of snow, night vision goggles instead of dawn light, gunfire snapping the silence apart. His knees buckled. Thor leaned into him immediately, pressing the full weight of his warm body against Ethan's side. Ethan gripped the dog's fur, grounding himself in the present, in the cold air, in the smell of pine, in the steady rhythm of Thor's breathing. "I'm okay," Ethan whispered. "Just needed a second." Thor waited until Ethan's breathing steadied. Then they climbed the rest of the way together. At the top of Frostline Ridge, the world opened. The valley stretched far below. Tiny houses, twisting roads, the glittering thread of Cold Creek weaving through it. Snow sparkled on every surface, and there, beneath a lone spruce tree, stood Hannah's grave marker, simple, wooden, handmade by Ethan himself. He approached slowly. Thor sat beside him, head bowed. Ethan touched the top of the marker with cold fingers. "Hey, sweetheart." Silence answered, but he felt something, warm, familiar, like the memory of her hand brushing his cheek. He sank to the ground, knees in the snow. "I got your letter," he murmured. "Both of them." He ran his hand over the wooden carving of her name. "I wish you told me sooner," he said softly. "About the money, about your father, about everything you carried alone." His voice cracked, a fracture in the cold morning. "I would have fought beside you. You didn't have to protect me from it." Thor nudged his shoulder gently. Ethan swallowed hard. "But you always tried to carry things alone, didn't you? Even when it hurt you." His eyes burned. He blinked the pain away. "For a long time I thought I failed you," he whispered. "Thought if I had been better, stronger, maybe you'd still be here." His voice broke completely. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." The valley wind swept around him, cold and sharp, like breath drawn through clenched teeth. Thor pressed his head into Ethan's chest, a steady heartbeat against Ethan's trembling hands. And then, like a memory rising from the snow, Hannah's recorded voice echoed in his mind. "Trust yourself. Protect them. Live." Ethan closed his eyes as tears froze on his lashes. Something inside him shifted. Slowly. Painfully. Not healing. Not yet. But beginning. He looked at Thor. "We made it this far because of you," he said. "You kept us together. She trusted you to lead us. And she was right." Thor licked his hand once, warm against the cold. Ethan stood, wiping snow from his knees. "Come on, boy," he murmured. "Let's go home." But as they turned, the wind shifted sharply, carrying a smell Thor recognized instantly, a smell that stiffened every muscle in the dog's body, a human scent. Unfamiliar. Too close. Thor growled, deep and primal. Ethan spun, scanning the tree line above the ridge. Footprints, fresh, disappeared behind packed snow. Someone had been here, recently, watching, following. He felt the chill settle into his spine. "We're not alone." Thor barked once. A warning, not fear. Then Ethan saw something sticking out from behind a rock. A scrap of fabric. Blue. Expensive. out of place in the wilderness. Gerald's. Ethan clenched his jaw. Even here, on sacred ground, on the ridge where Hannah rested, Gerald's shadow hunted them. He stared at the footprints again. Today they were alone. Tomorrow, maybe not. He took one last look at Hannah's grave, letting his hand rest briefly on the marker. "I promised I'd protect them," he whispered, "and I will." As he and Thor descended the ridge, the world brightened, sunlight cutting through the clouds, lighting the path home. The ghosts in Ethan's chest still lingered, but they no longer controlled him. He walked with a clearer purpose. There was more to do, more truth ahead, more battles to face, but for the first time since Hannah's death, he felt something flicker inside him. Not peace, but the possibility of it. The mountain behind him stood silent, but the message it carried echoed in his heart. "You lived through the worst. Now rise." Thor trotted beside him, guardian, partner, family. Together they walked toward the valley, toward the farmhouse, toward whatever waited next. The storm wasn't gone, but Ethan was no longer afraid of it. Not anymore. In the days that followed his visit to Frostline Ridge, something inside Ethan shifted, quietly, steadily, like ice melting beneath early spring sun. The grief didn't leave him. The memories didn't loosen their grip, but they softened, as if Hannah's voice had wrapped around him, urging him to rise instead of collapse. He worked with a different kind of purpose now, not just to rebuild the farmhouse, not just to protect Lily and Noah, but to build a future Hannah would have wanted, one rooted in service, in compassion, in honoring the battles both seen and unseen. The morning the idea came to him, Ethan stood in the barn, repairing one of the old support beams as dust drifted through rays of sunlight. Thor lay nearby, slowly stretching his healing leg, while the twins painted a wooden sign for the front porch. Noah tapped his paintbrush rhythmically. "Dad? Why do you think Mom loved this valley so much?" Ethan lowered the hammer. "Because it reminded her that even hard places can become homes." Lily smiled gently at that. "Like us." Ethan's breath caught at the truth in her words. He stepped outside, leaning against the railing of the newly rebuilt porch. Snow still clung to the fields, but sunlight shimmered across the drifts, making the valley look almost silver. Silver Creek Valley. Silver Ridge beyond it. Cold Creek. Frostline. These weren't just names. They were part of their story. He thought about the trust money. $200 million. Wealth he had never wanted, but now understood he was meant to use with purpose. Hannah hadn't saved that money for comfort or luxury. She saved it to build something. And so Ethan finally knew what he had to build. A place for the broken. For those who served. For those who hurt in silence. A place that would save others the way Thor had saved him. The Frostline Foundation. He could see it clearly. Cabins for veterans, training grounds for service dogs, therapy programs, emergency shelters, scholarships for local kids. A haven where no veteran, no family, no child would ever feel alone again. Thor nudged his leg as if asking, "What now, Ethan?" Ethan smiled. "Now we honor her." Over the next weeks, the valley buzzed with unexpected activity. Construction trucks rolled into the fields behind the farmhouse. Surveyors walked the property, marking off areas for cabins and training courses. Volunteers from town, people who had once looked at Ethan with uncertainty, now stepped forward with tools, lumber, and hot meals. Ethan worked beside them, sleeves rolled, boots caked in mud and snow, the weight of grief replaced by the momentum of purpose. Thor followed him everywhere, earning affectionate pats from volunteers and protective glances from the valley's children. During lunch breaks, Ethan met with community leaders and counselors, mapping out programs for PTSD support, vocational training, and crisis assistance. "This valley needs this," the local pastor told him, gripping Ethan's shoulder. "And your wife would be proud." Ethan swallowed hard. "I hope so." "You're turning pain into purpose," the pastor said. "There's no better way to honor her." Word spread quickly, first through the town, then through the county, and soon across the state. Donations began to appear in the foundation's mailbox. Letters from families thanking Ethan for providing what their loved ones never had. The twins helped plant apple trees near the training field. Lily hung small ribbons on each sapling, names of fallen heroes. Noah trained alongside Thor, mimicking the commands Ethan taught him, laughing when Thor nuzzled him for treats. One afternoon, as Ethan inspected the framework of the foundation's main building, a familiar black sedan pulled into the driveway. Samuel Pierce stepped out, holding a thick envelope. Ethan walked over, wiping sawdust from his hands. "Pierce, tell me this isn't another court battle." Samuel chuckled. "Not this time." He handed Ethan the envelope. "This is the final authorization. The estate trust is fully transferred to you. All assets, all protections. Hannah's wishes are now secured, permanently." Ethan turned the envelope over in his hands, feeling the significance settle into his chest. "Thank you. For everything." Samuel nodded. "You did the hard part. I just carried the papers." Before he left, Samuel knelt and scratched Thor behind the ears. "You did good, old boy. You kept them alive." Thor wagged his tail, eyes bright. As Samuel drove off, Ethan looked back at the foundation, the framework rising like a promise against the snowy sky. Hope wasn't a small thing. Hope built worlds. And then, the most unexpected moment of all occurred. One cold morning, Gerald Langston arrived in a gray sedan, not in a convoy, not with lawyers, not with arrogance. He stepped out slowly, older somehow, smaller than the shadow he once cast. Thor stiffened, but didn't growl. Ethan placed a hand on his head, a silent command to hold. Gerald approached the porch where Ethan stood. "I came alone," Gerald said quietly. Ethan folded his arms. "Why?" Gerald hesitated, a long, fragile silence moving between them. "Because I lost my daughter, and then I nearly lost my grandchildren, and now I realize I nearly lost something else." Ethan didn't soften. "Which is?" Gerald swallowed. "My chance to do better." Ethan didn't respond, not at first. He studied the man who had caused them so much pain, who had tried to break their family apart for the sake of control. Then he saw it. The grief, the regret, the cost. "I want to see the twins," Gerald said softly, "if you'll allow it." Ethan thought of Hannah, of the woman who always believed healing mattered more than revenge. He nodded slowly. "Supervised visits at the foundation. They deserve safety." Gerald exhaled shakily, nodding with gratitude he didn't know how to verbalize. Lily and Noah appeared hesitantly on the porch, and Gerald approached them like a man approaching a fragile seedling in winter. Thor watched every move, but he didn't intervene. Ethan stood quietly, hands in his pockets, watching the children talk softly to their grandfather under the pale morning sun. This was what Hannah wanted. Not a world free of pain, but a world where love still had room to grow despite it. That evening, as the sun dipped behind Frostline Ridge, Ethan walked the perimeter of the foundation grounds. Cabins stood framed against the sky. Paths had been laid. Volunteers had left their handprints in the wet concrete walkway. Thor walked beside him, tail swaying lightly, content. "You know," Ethan murmured, "none of this would have happened without you." Thor bumped his hand with his nose. Yeah, Ethan said, smiling softly. I know Hannah trusted me, but she trusted you too, maybe more. He stopped at the highest point of the property, looking out over the valley, a valley once filled with fear, now filled with possibility. Loyalty saves lives, he whispered. Thor looked up at him with knowing eyes, and somewhere deep in Ethan's heart, he felt Hannah smile. The storm had not vanished, but the future finally felt like a sunrise worth walking toward. Together, he and Thor headed back to the farmhouse, where warmth, family, and the beginning of healing waited inside. Tomorrow, the foundation would open its doors. Tomorrow, hope would become real. And Ethan knew, without Thor, without Hannah, without the fight, none of it would have been possible. 1 year later, Cold Creek Valley didn't look like the same place Ethan had first driven into with his world collapsing around him. Winter had returned, gentle this time, not cruel, laying soft white blankets across the hills and glassing the frozen creek with glittering ice. And in the center of it all, shining beneath the snow-draped pines, stood the frost-lined foundation. Cabins now dotted the landscape, warm lights glowing from inside, each one home to a veteran finding their footing again. The training field stretched behind them, marked by wooden beams, obstacle paths, and the distant echo of a handler calling out commands to a service dog in training. On the front porch of the main building, a new sign hung proudly. The Frostline Foundation, Loyalty Saves Lives. Ethan had carved the letters himself. Lily painted the background blue. Noah added a tiny paw print near the corner. Thor approved with a single tail wag. It was a good year, one built out of hard work, long days, healed nights, and slow breaths after too much pain. Inside the farmhouse, Lily's voice drifted through the living room as she worked on another art project. She'd grown taller, her face losing the softness of childhood and gaining a quiet determination. Her mother's determination. Noah now helped veterans on the weekends, guiding them through breathing exercises he learned from watching Ethan. Thor padded from room to room like he owned the house, and in many ways, he did. His limp had healed. His fur had grown thicker for winter. He still watched the doors, the windows, the tree line, but now with a calm confidence. The valley was no longer a battlefield. It was home. Ethan stepped outside with a mug of hot coffee, watching the frost cloud his breath. Snowflakes drifted gently around him, settling on his coat like tiny shimmering feathers. "Thor," he called. The dog trotted toward him through the snow, tail wagging, then paused suddenly, head lifting, ears straight. "What is it now?" Ethan asked with a smile. Thor didn't answer, of course, but he didn't have to. He turned and walked toward the old birch tree near the fence, sniffing at the base of the trunk. Snow had drifted thick against it, forming a small mound. Thor pawed delicately at the mound, then more urgently. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You found something again? What did you bury out here this time? Noah's gloves?" But Thor's behavior shifted, nose deep in the snow, tail stiff, shoulders tight with focus. This wasn't play. Ethan walked over. "What is it, boy?" Thor dug faster, snow flying in bursts behind him. Then his paws scraped something solid, something metal. Ethan knelt beside him, brushing the snow away with his bare hands. A glint of gold peeked through. A small ring, delicate, shining even in the winter light. Ethan froze. His breath caught. "Hannah's ring," he whispered. Thor stepped back, letting Ethan lift the tiny circle of gold. Her wedding band, warm now from his touch, even though it had been buried in snow. The same ring she'd worn every day, the one that had vanished after her final hospital visit. He stared at it, memories crashing like soft waves, the way she used to spin it nervously when she was thinking, the indentation it left on her finger after long nights, the quiet promise it held in every moment. Lily and Noah rushed outside, breathless from running. "What happened?" Lily gasped. "Dad, what's wrong?" Noah asked. Ethan held up the ring. The twins froze. Lily's eyes filled instantly. "Mom's wedding band." "I thought it was lost forever," Ethan whispered. Thor stepped forward, placing his head gently against Ethan's shoulder. "You always know," Ethan murmured to him. "You always find her." He slipped the ring onto a thin chain he wore beneath his shirt, a chain that had held his dog tags for years. Now Hannah's ring joined them, resting against his heart. The snow fell quietly around them, soft as breath. Lily hugged Ethan's arm. Noah leaned against his side. Thor sat close, forming a small circle of warmth in the cold. After a moment, Ethan stood and motioned for them to follow him up the small hill behind the farmhouse. It was a place they visited often, a place where wind carried echoes of memories and where the valley opened wide. The three of them stood there now, overlooking Frostline Ridge, the foundation cabins glowing like embers scattered across the land. Volunteer lights flickered from windows. A service dog barked happily in the distance. A veteran chopped wood beside the main lodge. Life. Healing. Hope. All born from pain, carried by love. Ethan wrapped an arm around each child. Thor stood in front of them, chest high, a guardian against anything that dared threaten this peace. "You know," Ethan said softly, "I used to think our lives ended the day those gates closed on us." Lily looked up at him. "But they didn't." "No," Ethan whispered, smiling as snow dusted his hair. "They began again." He looked out across the valley, Hannah's ring warm against his chest, Thor's silhouette strong against the white horizon. "Some doors close," he said quietly, "but sometimes your dog finds the one that opens everything." Thor barked once as if agreeing with the final word. The snow continued to fall, painting the world gentle and white. Ethan Cross, his twins, and the dog who had carried them through the darkest year of their lives stood together, whole at last, stronger than before, ready for whatever came next. Because they had endured, because they had healed, because they had each other, and because love, real love, never dies. It just waits to be found again. If this story moved you, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're standing for family, loyalty, and justice. And if you want more stories that honor good people fighting back the right way,